Welcome back. We're working our way through Module 3 about cartography. Before I continue, I should probably do a little house cleaning or let you know that you're not strange if you think that the picture-in-picture video of some of the YouTube videos is kind of herky-jerky. That's because my computer at work doesn't actually work as well as it should. Today we had a power outage at work, so I had to come home, and lo and behold, I use my computer at home, which is a better computer, and I get better webcam video. So I apologize for that. When you see good video, it probably means I'm recording this from home. In addition, you see the background of my home office. When it's herky-jerky, it's probably at work. Okay, last time I talked about classification. And I told you that you need to keep in mind 4 different things when you were doing classification. And I said standardization, which has to do with the areas of the polygons that are in your map and the differences in sizes. Number of class intervals, classification type, and symbolization. Unfortunately, I didn't really talk about the number of class intervals. So here I'll give you a quick summary of the number of class intervals. The rule of thumb is you probably shouldn't use fewer than 5. You probably shouldn't use more than 15 classes. Now you kind of have to use common sense. If you have 4 data points and you use 7 different class intervals, you're going to have an issue. If you have many data points, you can use many class intervals. So the number of intervals you can use kind of depends upon how many data points it is that you're trying to present in your map. There's an equation in your text that you can use that you can plug and chug number of data points and standard deviation of the values, and it'll give you an estimate of how many intervals you should use. But basically you should think about the message you're trying to send and whether by having too few intervals you're clouding out distinctions that you want the reader to see, or if by using too many intervals you're making it difficult for them to see that you have a main message about a certain interval or a certain group of data. So think about your message, match the number of intervals to the message you're trying to send. Okay, so now we can move on to color. This is a chart that shows the electromagnetic energy produced by the sun. So this curve is the energy that is produced by the sun in terms of energy intensity versus the wavelength. So these are the shorter wavelengths, shorter distances between peaks. These are the longer wavelengths, longer distances between peaks. So the sun puts out this spectrum of energy. Now because of the atmosphere, a lot of that energy in these white areas gets absorbed. And so the energy that makes it through, that you can see through the clear sky, looks like this. And it turns out, for whatever reason, that our eyes are sensitive to this short little band of wavelengths in here called the visible band. And so our eyes can see these things. There's all this energy that's coming from the sun that we can't see, but remote sensing devices can see, and I'll talk about that when I talk about remote sensing later in the semester. But our eyes are sensitized to seeing just in this little bandwidth of wavelengths. So the way our eyes work is we have these cells. We have cells called rods and we have cells called cones. The cones see color, the rods just see gradations of gray or grayscale, and we have different kinds of cone cells. We have cone cells that are sensitive to the blue-violet range, to the green range, and to the red range. But these cells don't respond to a single part of the spectrum. So if energy comes in at this wavelength like this, our cones, the blue-violet cones, start to respond. They start to put out signals. They start to put out chemicals. And they peak around here. But you'll notice that if an piece of energy comes in at this wavelength, some of our red cones are activated too. So there are kind of issues with people seeing blues and reds and greens overlapping, and that's one of the things that's a problem with distinguishing between colors, because multiple cell types are firing at the same wavelength, and so sometimes it's hard for people to distinguish between colors that are very close to each other. And so the researchers say that there are thousands of different wavelengths that an eye can distinguish, but there are only about 15 different gradations of grayscale that the eye can distinguish. And so when you think about colors and class intervals, you don't want to have 500 different class intervals, because when people look at a map, they're not going to be able to distinguish between those. Their eye won't notice a difference between those. And so you need to pick a number of class intervals that fits with the color discrimination that a person can do. You also need to keep in mind that sometimes your map is going to go to someone who's colorblind, so they're not going to be able to distinguish red from blue, from green from yellow, and about 3% of the population is that way. So when you're making a map that's designed for someone that's colorblind, you can't be using colors, you got to be using grayscale. Also keep in mind that sometimes maps are made into hard copy, and they're put on a Xerox copy machine, and they come out with a monochrome or a grayscale copy, and so any color that's in the original map won't make it through to the Xerox copied copy. So you got to think about the audience, the medium, and the message you're trying to send. There's a lot of research that's been done on color. It has a lot to do with cognitive psychology and physical things about your eyes and what they're sensitive to. But there's a person named Cynthia Brewer from Penn State who has encapsulated a lot of this research. They've done a lot of experiments where they vary certain aspects of color and see how people respond in terms of being able to understand, being able to discriminate or to distinguish. And she's put a lot of that into this website called Color Brewer. And so I'm going to just go quickly to the website and show you a little bit about what it can do, and leave the rest of color up to you. So let's see, I got Color Brewer here. This is Color Brewer 2. This is the Cynthia Brewer color website. She's from Penn State. She has a team of people working on this. And this is a really neat website, because what you can do is tell the website what kind of map you want to make, how many intervals you want to use, and it might suggest different types of color schemes that you could use to best send your message. So you can see up at the top, you can pick how many class intervals you want. So right now it's set at 3 intervals. We can go all the way up to 12 intervals. Let's say we pick something in the middle like 5. And the map will respond with picking colors that correspond to the number of intervals that you've chosen. You can also determine, or you can pick what type of data you have. If you want to use qualitative data, that's data that doesn't have any numbers associated with it, it's going to use colors that are completely different from each other. So qualitative data is generally ones where you use completely different colors for each category of data, so it makes it easier for the reader to distinguish between categories. There are issues with how you pick colors so that adjacent colors aren't close to each other. And you can imagine a United States map, and how do you color the states in the United States so that no two states have the same color, because they need to have different colors from their adjoining states so you can distinguish them. So there's lots of work that goes on mathematically to determine algorithms to figure out which things should get which colors. You can pick different color schemes. So for a qualitative scheme, you can see where I have a whole bunch of unique and distinct colorations for my different types of data. Okay? One of the things you need to remember with colors is, unless your map is going to be given to children or young people, you don't want to use colors that are really too bright, because bright colors attract children in general, but in general adults also are kind of put off by colors that are too bright. Adults tend to prefer colors that are more pastel or lightened, and they can still make the distinctions. Okay? You can select checkboxes here about whether you pick a scheme and whether it's colorblind safe. So let's say I pick this one and I'm going to give it to a child, and I'm saying, what about colorblind safe? None of these schemes are colorblind safe. So when I want something that I'm going to be able to do in monochrome, I need to pick something that would be colorblind safe and maybe sequential, that will give me something that when it comes out of a Xerox machine will still allow the map reader to distinguish between the grades of gray that will produce. This website lets you put other features, other vector features on top to see if that confuses things. You can also make the terrain show through. Here we have a transparency. There's no transparency shown here. If I go to full transparency and give it some time to load, hopefully it will load a terrain file, and I'm not seeing it loading that. Okay, so if that loads or not, we'll see. Maybe we'll refresh this and see if it'll load. Don't know why that didn't work, and I'm sorry that it took me so long to figure it out. So this would show a background terrain. This, we'll learn about this. This is what's called a hillshade, which is a model that shows you in something your mind thinks of as 3D elevation information. And so here I show a lot of transparency, and I can move this back if it's working properly, and when it does load, it will load the color over the top with a different level of transparency. But we have sequential, we have diverging, and we have qualitative. Qualitative are completely different colors. Sequential are multi-hue and single hue, but they're basically a single color with different levels of brightness or saturation shown. A diverging color scheme has a very light transition between the colors at the extreme. And so colors like this scheme here, red at one end and blue at another end, will show us something that's in the middle as a light or a neutral color, something that's at the left end or the high end would be red and another end would be blue. One of the things you have to remember about colors is sometimes colors have cultural meaning. So in this case, red and blue may mean things. Red may mean hot, blue may mean cold. And so if you use the color scheme in a way that is in opposition to the way historically or culturally color schemes have been considered, your language won't mesh with the reader's language. You have to be careful about that. Okay? Rather than try to go into more details about color, I can just say that there's a lot of research that's been done on color, and the best place, as far as I know, to find information about what type of color schemes will work with the map, the message, and the number of classes that you want to use is this Color Brewer website. And if you find a color scheme that's going to work for you, you can get the values of the colors, red, green, blue, or you can get hex or CMYK, but you can make the colors in ArcGIS match the colors on this website, and you can make your map match the color scheme that's on Color Brewer. Okay, that was kind of a modeled, quick through of color. Next time I'll wrap up this module with a very quick mention of many of the map elements that are involved in cartographic language. The other elements, the things that are in the map that aren't necessarily part of the theme or the classification or the symbology or the color, but other things that go with the map that help the map reader understand the message you're going to send. So that's what the next video will be about.